As Steve said, my name is Peter Leduc. I am an end-user computer specialist for the southeast of the country, and I have the pleasure of working with a lot of our higher education customers and discussing how we can use virtualization of desktops and our NVIDIA graphics cards together to create the best scenario possible for those end users that need to have the full benefits of a virtual desktop, along with the ability to run some high-end graphics and programs that require that. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for joining the call today. It will be about an hour long, and we're going to save the last 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A, questions and answers at the end. What I do ask as we go along, if you have any questions, you should have a chat window open at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to put your questions in there, and we will answer those at the end of the meeting. And just as a friendly reminder, everybody has been muted for this call. And to begin, I'd like to thank our two customers for helping us out today and talking about their use case scenarios. So we've got Florida Atlantic University down in Southeast Florida. They're going to be speaking with us in an Old Dominion out of Virginia. So without further ado, I'll give a little bit of introduction. As you can see on the screen there, we have we're going to have the first speaker will be Bernie Watson from VMware, and Bernie is our end-use computing sales engineer. He's going to do an overview of the solution set. We've got Ismet Nesicolachi, who is from NVIDIA, and he will be talking about the NVIDIA grid cards and how they work. And then our two use cases from our customers. We'll start with James and Farad from Florida Atlantic University, and then we'll go to Warren from Old Dominion University, and they will share with you their use cases and their experiences with the virtual desktop infrastructure and the NVIDIA grid cards. And then we'll save the last little bit for some Q&A. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is pass it over to you, Bernie Watson, my old friend, and thank you again, everybody, for joining. Bernie, it's all yours.
And Bernie, you have the ball now.
All right. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, and for attending today. And let's get into VMware Horizon in the higher education. With VMware, the very first thing that we like to think about, which is the foundation of everything that our products live on, is the software-defined data center. We feel like that without that, and it's one of our biggest assets, it's very similar to building a house. If you don't have a good foundation, you're kind of shot in the water right there, and feel like we have the best foundation that's in the market, and that is the software-defined data center. We also have the ability to do this, whether it's private, which would be on-prem for vSphere 6 and below, and then also in a public arena, which would be our vCloud Air, and our desktops ride on Horizon Air. And then we can combine those two currently with a hybrid model. We have several customers that do both, whether they want to do a complete CapEx type model with having it on-prem, or do a complete OpEx model with having it off-prem and just rent those services, or do a combination of both. But it is all based on our software-defined data center with vSphere. On top of that are two services that we offer here in the end-user computing market, which is desktops and mobility. The desktop is when you still need that traditional desktop. There are always going to be applications that require a Windows desktop, and we have the ability to build that desktop infrastructure on top of the software-defined data center. Once we have that desktop, we also need to add security for that, and that's the ability with our mobile platform, which was a purchase that we made about a year and a half ago, or maybe about a year or so ago, which was AirWatch. We can deliver all of these resources to the end user as we talk about it through this presentation, but then the big elephant in the room is talking about security. How are we going to secure that across all these different platforms and different devices that we do offer these resources? But all of this comes together in what we like to call a virtual workspace, and this is where we start to deliver these resources to the end user. The ability to deliver it in a consistent manner to the end user is what we like to call that virtual workspace. And really, it all boils down to delivering applications and their data. That's really all that matters to the end user. We need access to our data and the applications to manipulate that data. So we have to present that in a consistent way to those end users. And that's where, everything on the bottom is kind of the infrastructure, and now we're starting to deliver that to them. Now with this whole virtual workspace, for the, the ability to be able to do self-servicing, and that's going to require some automation on the back end for the IT infrastructure. We're going to have to set policies so we make sure that once we identify and give the identity to the user on what they're entitled to, we have to make sure that we have policies around that to make sure, excuse me, that they're only entitled to the resources that we want them to be and can only access them in the manner that we want them across their mobile devices. And that leads us to what can we access it, and it's pretty much anything. In today's world, we have all type of devices, not only the traditional PCs or laptops, but now we're really evolving into the tablets, the phones. The phones are getting larger and almost becoming like a tablet-type model. And even what's not listed here, even cars. We have some executives in our organization that even use Teslas and can bring up things on their screen within there in a virtual desktop, or basically the applications and data that they need to interact with. So it's the ability to access it across anything at any time that they want to, and then with the mobility and the AirWatch, being able to make sure that they're using it in the way that you want them to use it. Because for the end user, it's wonderful that they can access everything. From the IT shop, it's a fear there. So we have to make sure that they can only interact with their data with the applications that we want them to be. So when they're using their mobile devices, we kind of create like a dual persona type mode where it's the security or the boundaries of what we want to do on the corporate side and then leave alone what they want to do on the private side. Now, how do we access all of this with this virtual workspace? It's our unified workspace product. The ability to basically access all of their corporate resources regardless of the device they're in. It's the same consistent experience. And that's the beauty of this all, is that we have to give them the same experience for the end user. Once we give them two ways to access it, it's going to develop a help desk call. So we have to give them the same consistent experience regardless of what device or wherever they're accessing it, regardless of the OS or anything of that device, and also the form factor of that device. We also have the, the ability to, of course, we talked about accessing applications, regardless if they're hosted applications or even web applications, all their resources from the same unified workspace portal. Now within this portal, we have the ability to do custom branding so that we can really customize it to look like your organization or your school that's out there. Also, there's ability to have app waiting approvals so that when the user clicks on the app and wants to launch it, on the back end there has to be manager approval for that, which may be a great way for you to, as an IT shop, to be able to keep track of it from a licensing perspective. If I know exactly how many people I've approved to use this application and they have access to it, at that point I know how many licenses I have to maintain on the back end. And then our single application catalog there is giving the users the same experience that they have on their private side. When they go and buy a device these days, they actually buy that device and they go to some type of a store and start downloading applications. Well, if I have one place to entitle all of my applications to my users, I can put some out on the screen as you see right now out in the portal, or some in the application catalog, or they can hide certain things back in the application catalog and then bring them back out if desired, giving them the same look and feel that they have that they traditionally use when they use the different devices that they access out there, and the ability to organize their portal in the way that they want to organize it, whether it's dragging icons around to put them in the order or hiding them back in the catalog. Now, these are the different resources that are accessible. Pretty much anything that an IT shop needs to make accessible to an end user, we can put it within this portal. Whether it's a hosted desktop or application from a VMware perspective, or even a thin app package that runs locally, or a software as a service application. And the different ones that we also do is Office 365 and Google apps are starting to be popular ones, out there. Or even things like our competitors, which is Citrix XenApp. We know that customers are going to have these type of infrastructures. We're not asking them to go out there and rip and replace because that's a big infrastructure change. So if they desire to be able to use those are resources that are accessible to the end users. We need to bring all of them in and pull them all of them into one place that they can actually access. One place for IT to entitle these resources, one place for users to consume these resources. They log in once with their credentials, And then we handle all of the authentication on the back end using SAML authentication, so there's no double authentication there. So it's one experience across whatever device that they want to access it, because it's just a web portal to access their resources. Now, from a higher education perspective, we know there's several different use cases and ways that we've actually utilized our products within those type of organizations. One of the biggest ones is student lab and classrooms. You know, whether there's a fixed set of desktops or PCs that are being utilized, we need to give an experience and be able to quickly change over that experience regarding whatever class that happens to walk into that classroom or walk into that lab, or quickly offer several different labs from one single PC. And that's all done with a virtual desktop. We can quickly create those desktops, make it accessible to those endpoint devices, and then when the user logs in based on their credentials, or we can give them whatever they have access to in there, and quickly recycle that machine into the next user or student that walks into that classroom or into that lab. Then it becomes, well, what about learning? Even in the workplace or in the classroom, we're no longer tied to the concrete. We're no longer tied to the individual rooms that those things are there. We can actually do distance or remote learning in today's world. All we need is access to the internet to access our desktop or our resources that need to be accessed from that educational facility, and we can do there. So now it becomes wherever we're sitting becomes our classroom, as you see in the picture in the top right corner. If in our classrooms or whether we're doing distant learning, people want to use their own devices. That's why they went out and bought it. They're comfortable with whatever device they're utilizing. So we want to be able to make those devices be able to access all of our resources and run this. All the different tablets, phones, Macs have become very popular out there. It also takes a lot of burden of managing those devices away from that education facility to say, hey, you have your own device. I'm just going to present you a secure desktop based on your credentials that are out there. But we do have a lot of other devices that are available in the university or the schools, and when people come in, we can take and repurpose those, use them as kiosks or within the libraries, and let people that do not have a device or do not have anything electronic with them at the time walk up to a kiosk at one of these areas and just log into it with their credentials and be able to access whatever they need with a lockdown, basically start out with just a kiosk there. So all of these things, we can present their resources to them or their desktop to them. Now, one of the great use case examples that we have out here is Pittsburgh State University. They were a university that basically their desktops became unmanageable. Once we start handing out devices or desktops out into the world, they're out there. And being able to manage all of them becomes tremendous, a difficult task to take on. Not to mention our end users want to have the ability to personalize those devices, to be able to install the applications that are personal to them, and it becomes very unmanageable. Well, we introduced to them the Horizon View Mobile Secure Desktop. So we present a desktop to those end users in a very secured manner on whatever device they want to use, so they have their own personal world that they can manage and do whatever with, and we can present a secure desktop to them. And this actually reduced a cost avoidance of about $1.2 million for them for future hardware costs and the management of that hardware, to be able to do that by presenting a secure desktop that the IT shop can manage and secure and tightly down while still allowing them to do whatever they want to on their own personal device. We also reduced the boot times, because by having this desktop that's secure there, that we can actually dictate what's being done on that desktop and present it and put it on the correct hardware, and the latest and greatest hardware, we were able to drive down the boot times down to about 10 seconds for those, which allows them to, which the students want to be able to access their resources very quickly. In today's world, they're used to these very fast solid-state type devices, and when they bring them up, they want them up instant. We're in an instant type world today. Well, it's a great quote right here at the bottom that basically talks about that the CIO wanted to mention, that says that they wanted to make sure that the students were able to get their degrees without technology getting in the way. That's pretty much anything in the world. Technology is a necessary evil to help run the different things in this world, whether it's a business or a school, but it should not get in the way. It should just enhance that person's experience in accessing the resources and doing what they need to do. Lastly, we have another one here from another university that was doing labs and having a very difficult time managing the labs. It's a very manual process to go out there and reset the labs. It's taken a long time. We also introduced Horizon View to them, and they were able to reset their labs in a matter of minutes from when one class went in or one student came in or out, let them do their lab, have their experience, and then reset that desktop very quickly for the next student that came in and didn't have any legacy stuff that was there. How do we do all this? Delivering the best experience, we're using our Horizon 6 platform. What we have is what we feel is the best in breed in a presentation protocol. Whether it's a LAN, WAN, or whatever, it's an adaptive protocol that adjusts to wherever that user's coming from. Remember, 100% of the resources from a hosted desktop or application are running in the data center, and we're presenting that like a long monitor mouse and keyboard cable out to that device the user's using. So we have to have the best protocol to give them the best experience that they desire. People are used to basically a MacBook Air with a solid-state drive, or whatever the device is with a solid-state. They want that same experience. And that turns to, well, with this adaptive protocol, we can do this on any client that's out there, any type of endpoint device, whether it's a laptop, PC, tablet, window, mobile device, or even thin or zero-type clients, which we can able to deliver this desktop experience. Since we're using our own devices and we're accessing a desktop that's running in the data center, we'd like to have the same experience. So we need to make sure that all of those resources that are available on that endpoint device are seamlessly integrated into that desktop experience, whether it's printing, the USB devices, or multiple monitor support to be able to access these things. And then, regardless of what we're doing in that virtual desktop, we need to make sure we have the best experience, whether we're using some type of unified communication and soft phones to be able to communicate from our endpoint device into that desktop, or 3D graphics. There's a lot of education classes out there, whether it's a CAD class or a computer graphics class that has 3D graphics, and they need to have that experience, no different than if they were standing at a very high-end desktop that's got 3D graphics acceleration cards. The same experience and the same resources need to be accessible from their virtual desktop. And all of this is available with Horizon 6. So that's a quick presentation on understanding how Horizon 6 is accessible to the higher education market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernie. Appreciate the presentation. I'll now pass the ball to Ismet. Ismet, you should have the ball now.
Hello, Steve. Can you hear me?
I can. And do you have the ball?
No.
All right. Again, there was the 2 logins, so let me try it again. Okay. Do you have it now?
Shoot, sorry. No, I don't see it.
Okay, I'm going to...
You want to bring up mine and you drive?
Yeah, I can do that. Either that or I can just...
Oh, I'm sharing now. Can you see it?
I can indeed.
Okay.
If you can maximize that size.
Yeah. Okay. Good to go?
All right.
Looks good.
Thank you, Ismet.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, again. This is Ismet Nezikohachi with NVIDIA. I'm responsible for our education market here in NVIDIA as a business development manager, and I'm happy to talk to you about NVIDIA Grid. So first slide, I actually got to pick it up exactly where VMware Bernie left it off with be able to use any of the devices. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. You know, the most important is the graphics experience. Many of you probably have had experience with deploying or looking at VDI, and ultimately, if you don't deliver a great graphics experience to your user, it's going to be a tough sell, and that's where the most important thing that we come and fit in. We're able to solve a lot of benefits and address a lot of challenges, but we deliver a great graphics experience to any device. The other thing to remember is that a lot of these laptops, smartphones, and tablets today already come with a GPU, GPU being a graphics processing unit. So these devices already be able to interpret some of the DirectX and OpenGL, and most importantly, many times, the video that's being delivered. So we already have some of these great devices, and what if we can deliver all that graphics to it and get to an end user point, which looks something like this. The difference, as you can see, is night and day. This example is specifically to an application called SolidWorks. The folks that are in engineering obviously will be very familiar with that application. But you can kind of think of as your professors and faculty are able to deliver this kind of image to the students as they describe and teach courses in mechanical engineering or what it may be, and be able to talk specifically and gauge how the model changes and develops as it goes through the various stages. Now, this is not a real application. If it was an actual application I'm running, I could zoom in and out of that GPU image. I could rotate it in real time. Absolutely full workstation performance as if I was actually sitting at a workstation. So if we're able to deliver this to you, what benefits are we solving? There's several benefits. I want to highlight three probably most important. One, the concept of BYOD. You guys in education probably have this problem more than any other industry in the world, with thousands and thousands of students coming in with every possible device. And most importantly, every one of those devices may have very different OS. So how are you able to support the different applications, especially when you get to the high-end applications? You look at something like AutoCAD, which is a Windows DirectX graphics library. So it's really a Windows application. How are you able to support that with students coming in with Macs, different tablets, iPads? We're able to deliver that immersive graphics experience to any one of those devices. Scalability. The scalability is important because as you grow, if you decide to deploy this, you can move and grow and add vGPUs. But the important part of it is that we've had a lot of customer experience telling us how they're able to add online classes, distance education, and deliver labs and or even just instructional classes to different students remotely. And finally, the concept of easily to deploy. This is important and good for IT, but ultimately what we mean by that and what's important for it is we're able to deliver a class quickly to any classroom, to any lab, and then quickly reprovision it for the next professor that comes in. And so you're able to do that in a classroom quickly. So let's look at how we do this and how we accomplish that. So if you're familiar with NVIDIA, one of our most popular products is our Quadro product line that we put in our PCs and workstations. We have about a 75% market share in that space. What we've done, we've taken that exact same Quadro workstation class graphics, and we've put it on a PCI card that will go in a server. And then we run VMware vSphere and VMware Verizon, and be able to deliver that graphics quality workstation to your computer labs, to your classrooms, and to any device. So what are those cards that we put on those servers? They're called our NVIDIA Grid K1 or NVIDIA Grid K2 classes. K1 is the lower end, K2 is the higher end. Typically, on the left, you see the engineering, art and technology, and kiosks engineering going to be the type of applications that will require the higher end of the graphics capabilities. Art and technology will require a lot of graphics capability as well, things maybe like Revit or Maya. And then lower end is kiosks and libraries, as Bernie was talking about, maybe being able to set up these applications to be able to be accessed across your campuses. And you can see some of the specs that are available for each one. The K1 has actually 4 GPUs versus 2 GPUs, but the K2 has Quadro 5000 class, which is our highest end graphics. So that's what you're going to be using if you do something, again, like SolidWorks, the example I had earlier in my slides. So moving right along, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because I know our guest speaker today probably I've seen have some information on this as well. But I just want to bring attention to 2 things. One is the concept of profile, just so when you do implement this, what we'll work with you and help you understand and sizing of the kind of a virtual GPU you need to set up, and we call that a profile. And that is based on how much memory each user is going to need, you know, the capacity, the performance that is required, and the maximum displays. And this is going to determine. You can see the 3rd column here, the column that says number per board, is probably going to be a big important number for many of you as you look at this, because this really tells you how many users you're going to be able to put per board. So you can see, and we can put 2 boards today per server in most cases. In some cases we can kind of go a little bit more in some exceptions. But you can see the most is 32. You put 32 boards per server, so times 2, that's 64. And then the other end of that spectrum is 2, so 4 users per server. And so what servers and what OEMs do we support? You can see them here, pretty much everybody out there. And you can find the full supported actual servers on that URL link that you see there in the bottom, nvidia.com/buygrid. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about how it works from more a deeper technical perspective. When you get an NVIDIA vGPU card, you're really getting 3 things. The first thing is the actual hardware card in itself that goes into one of those servers that we just explained. Then the VMware vSphere hypervisor sits on top of that. And the other component that you get is a vGPU manager that sits there in the hypervisor. That component is really important because that's what assigns a virtual machine to a virtual GPU and understands and is really the manager, that broker that allows that to happen. And the third component that you get, which is also very important, is the actual NVIDIA drivers that sit in the virtual machine for each guest OS. That component is important because the NVIDIA drivers supports native OpenGL and DirectX, as well as the latest OpenGL 4.3, and that will be able to deliver you full performance workstation capacity. That's really what makes a lot of that happen. And each virtual machine and guest OS is given access to that NVIDIA drivers. And then each guest OS now has a virtual GPU and is delivered, as we said, to any device remotely or on campus. And now you have a GPU-enabled server delivered through the data center. Setting up is fairly simple. Here's just a quick glance at it. We don't introduce any new management. You use your VMware management to do this. So you can see there on the right, you just select and say, okay, now I have a NVIDIA Grid vGPU in my system. This is the profile I'm going to use. You see there's being, for example, selected Grid KT20Q, and on you go. Our engineers have done a wonderful job of helping making this simpler by by writing a VMware NVIDIA Grid deployment guide. You see a link over there, and we can distribute this link. We've also created NVIDIA Grid forums for questions and talking to the community. And finally, I want to direct you guys to 2 other programs. One is what we call a direct access program that we've done jointly with VMware. You sign up and become a member of this direct access program. We'll be able to deliver you customized content in forms of benchmarks, white papers, best practices. There's also NVIDIA experts available in coaching and then giving you directions and help as you deploy. And then, of course, our whole community of users. And finally, if what you heard today, you find it very interesting, something you want to pursue, the first place I invite you guys to go is to the VMware TriGrid site, where you get assigned a virtual desktop with an NVIDIA GPU running in the background. We have a bunch of applications, high-end graphics applications running there. You can see engineering, office productivity, 3D graphics, and you can actually test on your own remotely how NVIDIA Grid GPU runs and the experience you may get. So that does it for me. Thank you very much. Please continue sending any questions through the chat rooms, and happy to take your questions at the end.
Okay, so thanks for joining us today. My name is Pooran Rambarose, and my colleague here to my left is James Mauser, and we are the team leaders for the VMware infrastructure here at Florida Atlantic University, specifically for the College of Engineering and Computer Science. So just a little bit about our college. Again, we're just a College of Engineering, and we have about 110 faculty and staff. Our students range anywhere from 2,200 to about 2,500. And our servers and desktop virtualization is accomplished using VMware. About 90% of our desktops are virtualized, and 95% of our servers are virtualized. We just have about 5% that are legacy servers that are on their way out that are not virtualized yet. In engineering and in all of our computer labs, we have Teradici-based Zero clients, and most of our faculty and staff use the Zero clients as well in their offices. So our problem statement here. You know, as we mentioned earlier, our faculty, staff, and students are using Horizon View. We actually started out with View 4.5. We then moved on to 4.6, 5, and then 5.2, 5.3. And now we're on 6.1. And our faculty and staff have been using View both on and off campus. But we soon found out that in regards to our 3D applications, we started getting complaints about the performance and rendering of parts. And specifically, this was in relation to our classes that taught AutoCAD and SolidWorks. So again, some of the 3D elements were just not rendering properly. And you know, one of the things that recurring themes that we got among these complaints was the 3D apps did not match performance of a physical computer. So here's a little timeline. Back in 2010, 2011, we had bought some workstations, and in these workstations, we implemented the ATI RG220 video cards. For the output was directed towards the PC over IP protocol. Initially, these 12 workstations took up a lot of space in our data center, and it was a one-to-one connection, so it was not one-to-many. And we still had to manage these workstations like we did in the physical lab. Our second phase was we acquired some Supermicro blades with RG220. Now, this was a smaller form factor, and we did get significant space reduction. But we were still challenged with managing these blades like a physical lab. So moving on to 2014, that's where we investigated the VSGA and VDGA offerings from Horizon View, and we were using that with the NVIDIA K1. The VSGA we found had the density that we required, but it did have some limitation. the VDGA, that's a typo there, should be A instead of an S. Worked very well, but did not have the density that we needed. One thing that we did throw in the mix here was we had Teradici 2800 host accelerator cards for PC over IP acceleration. And the hardware that we installed these on were Dell R720s. So now we jump to 2015, and we have a current deployment of Grid vGPU using the same NVIDIA K1 cards and the Teradici host accelerator cards as well. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Mr. James Mauser.
Hey everyone, I'm James. So, we had this before and after, what happened, how is vGPU better than our previous VSGA, VDGA deployment? And with our VSGA, it was nice, worked, but it was it was hit and miss if it worked in some programs. Some of the problems we had in that were something like SolidWorks would come up, and as you were working in it, if you tried to render something that the GUID didn't know how to handle, or if the kernel didn't pass it through the right way, basically it put the mode into software mode, and from there your whole computer was slow until you logged out and logged back in. So the students were having a lot of problems with not knowing when it would be, it just wasn't consistent for them. Our hardware VDGA, we didn't put into production because the limitation with the one-to-one, we could have 8 users on a card, and that just wasn't the density we needed for our classes. And the other problem was with our VSGA mode, you just wouldn't get the right rendering of graphics. There would be blockiness sometimes. Google Earth would be not very reliable whenever you're trying to do some high def with ArcGIS. There was all kinds of random weird problems with it. And now that we've went to vGPU, our performance is very consistent across every app that we're using. Currently, we're using, Ismet had showed a chart, which I'll show again in a second. We're using the K140Q profile. And what that is that's 1 gig of memory per VM. And so that limits how many users you can have per card. We had initially thought we could use the 512 megs so we could get 32 VMs per host, 32 VMs per card, and that didn't work out because we had to change to this different profile because SolidWorks did not like the 512 megs of RAM with it. So we went on, so we lowered our density a little bit, and we had to prepare and change how we handled our hardware on that. Our user acceptance, we've gotten a lot of emails saying, hey, this is much better than last semester. What happened? So this is very positive. Usually we get just negative emails, so that's nice. And 3D apps are rendering as expected, which is fantastic. We do some really high-end research applications with SolidWorks and a program called ANSYS, which is finite element modeling. And to be able to have these in a research environment is pretty spectacular. So this is the chart that Ismet had showed, so sorry to repeat. So the Q in these references here, they represent like Q1, the K140Q represents that it's a qualified video driver, meaning that it's going to work for most of your high-end 3D applications, SolidWorks, AutoCAD, ArcGIS. These are the standard programs that most engineering colleges use. So you can see the difference in users. You can get really good performance on the K1 cards with the K180Q, but you can only get 4 users per card. So you have to know ahead of time what you need and who your audience is to what you're going to need to provide to them. And the K2 cards are much less density, but they are really high-end for your very heavy users, so your designers and your power users. So our cart isn't nearly as exciting as Ismet's, but the one on the left here, this little candlestick, this is a basic drawing, of course, it was done without vGPU, VSGA, or VDGA. This means this was just done in VMware Views software mode, and it was pretty basic. Without doing any changes to the part, no other rendering, we enabled vGPU with that profile that we just talked about and did the same part, and it rendered much better. Of course, you know, now you can see the shadows and those black marks still need a little bit of work, but this is out of the box without any tuning change from what you would have seen in your previous View deployments. So just to give you an example, this is what happens at the server. This is running the NVIDIA command on the host called NVIDIA-SM, as in Mike, I, as in Indigo. And you can see here, it shows you the CPU. We have 2 K1 cards in each of our servers. This is showing one server. So you can see the GPU 0 through 7 and the type of card that it is, the temperature, the wattage, and the memory usage. And specifically, you can see the GPU utilization on it. So this was taken during the time of a class running, and you can see one of those GPUs was running about 72% utilization. And on the right side is the continuation of the chart that just shows the VM that's running it and how much memory is allocated. So that 896 megs is the profile of using the 1 gig profile. And from our perspective, that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Warren Marcelino from Old Dominion University. I'm the Enterprise Desktop Support Manager. I'm in charge of both the academic and administrative desktop and end-user computing environment here at Old Dominion University. And today I get to discuss some of my favorite systems, VDI. We talk about our View implementation and how we leverage our NVIDIA Grid cards, GPU cards today. All right, a little bit about ODU. We're a mid-sized research university. We have enrollment of 25,000, about 5,000 faculty and staff. We're located in Norfolk, Virginia. If you guys aren't familiar, we're right there at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. All right, we have 6 major colleges, arts and letters, business, education. We also have our administrative offices and units, which provide support to our university. All right, let me start with our history and milestone of our VDI implementation. In about 2009, we started our journey in VDI. We looked at View 3.0. We were looking at ways we can improve our lab operations. You know, how do we get around replacing our physical workstations for virtual workstations? We also needed a device where, at the time, View didn't have a remote application, so we leveraged an open source application called VCL. It was by North Carolina State University. So as we grew, from 2010 to 2012, we had VDI interest grow for a lot of our faculty and staff. And the main driving point of that was we had the ability where we were able to leverage, instead of having, one of the difficulties our faculty have had with applications where when they provide applications to their students, they became kind of ad hoc IT. They had to provide them documentation. They had to deal with the hardware issues that you do when you have software in the classroom. With VDI, we simplified that for them. They now can focus on teaching the application. We would put the application in the VDI, and it created an environment where the environment was equal for both the faculty and the students. They had exactly the same configurations. The teacher didn't have a full copy and the student have a student copy. Now they were using the same copy. So this kind of fidelity with the system simplified how we can give applications to our distance learning students, to learning on campus, and it was a much agile solution. So if we had requirements where we had to give administrative rights to a student, we can do this in a virtual environment. We had a lot more flexibility. So the interest in VDI, grew and then over the next 2 years. And as it grew, there were expectations along with it. And one of the things that we ran into was they started wanting more graphics-intensive applications like AutoCAD. And I think the other one was a Movie Maker. Now, the key of this was that in doing this, we had the graphics acceleration. It was a lot to be desired at the point. It wasn't as good as it could be. They would tolerate it as far as its performance, but we really need something that kind of to move forward with it. And when we had DirectX applications, this is where it was kind of a limiting factor. It wasn't supported. It wasn't until late 2012 to 2013 where we started looking at GPUs. And with the assistance of Dell and NVIDIA, we were able to get a pre-release of the K1 cards and the Dell R720 servers, so we can start testing the shared and direct graphics acceleration. And from there, we actually started seeing a lot of improvement on some of the older DirectX and OpenGL applications. So moving forward to 2014, this is when we got into the early release program with the vGPUs. And this was a huge step forward where we started seeing improvements in a lot of the later applications where we saw greater support for DirectX and OpenGL applications. All right. So our implementation. At ODU, we have a centralized service. We provide student lab operations where we have, faculty all different colleges can host their applications here. We can make them available for their classes in their college. We also use it to supplement our mediated classrooms so that one of the problem states we run into is that our training labs are always booked throughout the year, but they're in a mediated classroom. So now the instructors can, load a view, and if the students have their laptops or tablet devices, with the view client, they can log in and pretty much right there, kind of an ad hoc lab at that point where the instructor can go through without having to check out the lab. So this has really expanded some of our operations. And the remote access to the labs, this is a basic use case that distance learning students or military students are able to access our environment, have the same resources. We also have developed specialized pools for assistant administrators where we need things more secure, our special use cases. Now, as we moved on, we got, when we had colleges with more specific deployment needs, they wanted things more specific. Like they wanted their own virtualized labs, testing centers, research type environments. So then we started doing, this is where ITS became more of a consultant. We would bring them into the fold, allowing them, we would act as a consultant, looking at their use cases and recommending what hardware path to go so that we can assist them in their VDI implementations. All right, here's a reference architecture of our environment. Well, we have a management cluster. This houses our infrastructure, and this basically just has our infrastructure so that we can separate the computing needs of the desktop and compute clusters. We have three main compute clusters. We have a grid cluster, which is for academic desktops, which a lot of our graphic acceleration pools are located in here. We have 7 Dell 7R20s with 14 K1 NVIDIA grid cards. We also have the pools, resource pools enabled on all our pools to make sure that if we have any resource overruns, we can deal with them directly at the pool level. Our next cluster, which consists of 3 Dell 10s, is our non-GPU. This is just if we have a pool that's specifically for just compute resources. This is one of our older clusters without GPUs, but this is where we put a lot of those pools. Our last one, our actors cluster. This is our administrative desktops. This is where you have the knowledge workers, the basic fundamentals of VDI. All right. So one of the things in VDI is your ability to take advantage of the resource utilizations. And one of the ways we do this is with vCenter Operations Manager. Now it's called vRops or vRealize Operation Manager. With this, we've been able to develop KPIs and supermetrics. And how this is helpful for us is that as we develop these supermetrics, they're usually based off the basic metrics that are provided in the system. So when we're troubleshooting, we have a way that we can kind of look at the environment much more generally and kind of know where to go when we're troubleshooting. We're able to correctly size our VMs. This is one of the things that we did as we moved forward in our understanding of VDI was, when is it too big or when is it too small? vCenter Operations helps us to do that, and where we can take advantage of our hardware. We can understand our resource utilization and plan for future expansion. We kind of know when we have more headroom. And measuring end-user performance. So what I have here is one of our dashboards here. Right now it's all green. It has a management color, so if you go from green, yellow to red, it kind of gives you a heads up. But these metrics we developed so that we had a way to kind of give a heads up look at if something is going wrong or if something's happening right now, or if we have an anomaly, we'll kind of know. Like our PCOIOP traffic, we're able to at least tell what our communication is to our zero clients. Where our pod status, we're able to see what kind of connections we have. Is it external, internal? How many desktops are on? And how many disconnected sessions? On the very far right is our storage. This is important for us as we understand our IOPS. We want to see, as you know, VDI is very IOP intensive, so it's important to know where your IOPS are coming from. We have multiple data stores that are defined, such as our replicas, our servers. So if we have any issues, we kind of have a way to go back quickly to isolate the problem and get to its root cause. Numbers of vCPUs. This is important for us as we see what we do is as we spin up more and more workstations, our vCPU goes up. This kind of shows us where we're at in our resource, and we know that when we're hitting the point where user experience will start to degrade, we have a kind of a metric to show from the outside without, before the users get to us, we kind of know when things are starting to degrade, and this is when our resource pools come into play where we can start adjusting them if we need to, if we run into a resource contention type situation. All right. Now, one of the benefits we have with the NVIDIA GPUs, well, we first start off with the early renditions with software acceleration. It's slow, it's tolerable for most simple applications, but as expectations grew, it was no longer sufficient. So this is what led us to, direct and shared graphic acceleration. Now, the one thing for us is, since I'm servicing 6 major colleges, the direct one we know works has the highest performance, but I have to be able to address the needs of the other colleges as well. So with that, we've been able to, with our shared graphic acceleration, we've been able to meet, I guess, the basic case of most of our undergrad work. We're in AutoCAD and ArcGIS, and in a majority of applications, we're able to provide that performance. The cases we can't meet are the ones that are corner cases, which are those that really have the high-end requirements. And I guess the nice part about that is most of those people usually had the high-end laptops to go with it, but when we're dealing with someone who's not too far deep, is just learning, the shared graphics has met that need for us. Now, one thing we did really see, though, with the shared graphics is that we, in times like MATLAB, we had to have software settings that allowed it to utilize the hardware acceleration. Those aren't properly advertised, but once you find them, you'll see improvements how it better utilizes the hardware. So now we'll move into the grid vGPUs. With the GPUs, one of the benefits we've seen with it was that we have greater support for DirectX 11 and OpenGL, and this really was a step forward to allow us to use some of these newer applications, and we were able to appease some of our newer clients that were like, well, I have this advanced software, can I get this used in VDI? We're now able to tell them yes, because we're now able to take advantage of those things. The software recognizes the GPU correctly. We no longer have to look for any subsettings to configure it so it takes advantage of hardware acceleration. Right now, we plan on implementing the K120Q. It's the highest density, but it kind of matches the need, what we need with the shared graphics, because it does meet 90% of our student needs. So moving forward, this is some of the applications we're deploying with our vGPUs, ArcGIS. PLM software, NX, Windows Live Movie Maker. And this is actually, this is an interesting one. This is what kind of stemmed the whole process of chasing for GPUs, because it requires DirectX. We couldn't solve it previously with shared graphics. You know, it wasn't until we got the vGPUs where now we can say yes to this application. Adobe Creative Suite, we can now take advantage of that. MathWorks, MATLAB, Autodesk, and SolidWorks. So this is not necessarily video, but it actually kind of relates to it in the end. This is one of the things we take advantage of in VMware is the app volumes. As you notice, as you grow in your pool deployment, you start to have more and more pools. And because you're picking pools for different types of use cases, what we want to move to is where we reduce these pools and start leveraging our IDMs and basically start to have applications assigned to users, where instead of assigning users to pools and we're just finding and kind of guessing, well, we know you need this software and we kind of group it together. What we like to move into is you know, reducing our storage footprint, reducing our custom pools to where when a student registers for classes, we're able to put them in a group. That group can now be, when they log into a VDI pool, they log into our VDI, we provision applications to them. All right. So in addition to that is our user experience manager. We are now able to apply user settings on the application launch. So this eliminates having to create these settings at the pool level. We can now make them at application launch. Now, this customization is an important piece for user adoption. If any of you have ever taken away a desktop from a person who's satisfied with the performance of the real desktop, you know, and you give them a new one, you're like, well, you're giving a new one. Why isn't that you want this new one? Well, a lot of it's that personalization field. They've kind of moved into it. This is something we want to add to VDI as a certain dynamic. Right now, we have it to where it's volatile. We will want to bring a way of personalizing to where these our end users or students, you know, they spend time configuring their Autodesk, their preferences. We want to see if we can preserve that so that we get more user adoption. They have more ownership in it. Now, we're doing that with the app volumes. As we're leveraging students, we can now build what's called software profiles, because we know by the applications that they're associated with, we can now see if any of their applications are 3D accelerated. Or if we realize, so if we know or not, if you recall our architecture, we had a non-GPU cluster and a GPU cluster. By their application, at this point, we can now do a little bit of orchestration and say, you know, these students with these certain applications, you know, belong to the non-compute node. And the users who have AutoCAD or Autodesk, we can now move them into the compute areas where we have the 3D acceleration. And how this is beneficial for us is that with these custom pools, we can have it where essentially the users simply log in and then they go to the pool or go to where we need them to go and have the necessary resources. And this is our future goals with Horizon 6. And as we move forward, we can look for ways that we can move away from the higher density one to maybe a lower density, higher performance type profile as we understand our utilization. So moving forward, this is what we see that we can do as we modernize our VDI environment. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Warren. We'll now go to the Q&A session, and there are some questions in the window, so I'll start reading those off, and then either, depending on who they're aimed at, they can answer the question. First question is, has the lack of a live vMotion with vGPU been an issue when managing ESXi hosts?
That is probably meant for either FAU or ODU, I imagine, because yeah, just today we do not support vMotion with vGPU. So James, Warren, you guys have had any issues with that? Has that been an issue for you guys?
This is James at FAU. You know, it's a concern, but it's not. It hasn't prevented us from being in production. So we just have to manually watch what's going on. But because the computers are limited pretty much by the number of VMs are limited by the number of what profile you're using, it pretty much you don't have to worry about it, because if I can handle 32 computers on that card, whenever the 33rd one goes on, it doesn't power on or work anyway. So it would be nice if it is, but that's maybe down the road kind of thing.
Next question, can you run different grid profiles on a grid card?
Yeah, I can answer that. This is Ismet. The answer is yes. So you take a K2, for example, a Grid K2 card, which has 2 GPUs. You can run one profile on one GPU and another profile on another GPU, and that's where that vGPU manager that sits in the hypervisor comes in and does his work and able to manage that.
Okay, and the next question, can you use mixed or different grid cards in one server?
I'll take that as well. The answer is once again yes. They're very same concept, so you can put a K1 card and a K2 card on the same server and then run different profiles off of the different GPUs. You cannot, maybe a follow-on question is, can you change that? And the question is, you cannot change that on the fly. You can reconfigure everything and reassign different cards and profiles, but once it's configured, you can run different cards and different profiles.
Okay. And the next question, are any of these presenters using video conferencing with their VDIs with K1 cards? My assumption is that's aimed at FAU or Old Dominion.
No, we are not using video conferencing. This is FAU.
We're starting out testing with Jabber on that. So far, it's been pretty usable for us. We tried it, but there's still a little bug troubleshooting before I could release it out to production. But we are looking at doing it with Jabber.
Okay. Ismet, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'm not using that. We do within NVIDIA have virtual desktops, virtual GPU desktops available to the employees. So if I'm on the road, I can use it, but I'm not using that right now.
Okay. The next question, do they make the K1 card for server blades, and specifically Cisco or Dell?
So the answer is no. The only vendor today that has something like that is HP. They use a mezzanine card to go into the blade and put a card. Cisco and Dell do not support that today. We are working on that, and I guess all I can say right now is stay tuned.
All right. Next question. Is the K1 card configured per VMs powered on, or is it concurrent connections to the host?
This is Puran at FAU. It's configured per VM. At least that's how we have it in our deployment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's typical.
All right, I'm looking for another question. Hang on. Next question was, how do the schools deal with when their thin clients reach end of life, when they no longer support current versions of Horizon View 6.1?
We haven't, here at ODU, we've had our P20 still in production. I guess we wouldn't replace them just like anything else. I think with the P20s, it was a limitation of, I want to say, I'm going along the stretcher, but I know for us, it's a lot longer than the life of a workstation, because I know that we've taken even old workstations and converted them to basically an equivalent to a thin client. So.
Okay.
Yeah, this is FAU here. We have a mix of both thin clients and zero clients. The thin clients did not really work out for us, and after just 2 or 3 years of ownership, they were end of life. The zero clients, on the other hand, have worked out better. We have a mix of Terra 1 and Terra 2 zero clients. The Terra 1 zero clients, the end of life isn't until I want to say Q2 of 2016, but the Terra 2s are going strong here. So we haven't really had much issues with the Zero client. Definitely more issues with thin clients.
Thank you very much. Next question. We're using Grid K1 cards with vSphere with Direct Path I/O configured. Will the vGPU deployment model allow us to live migrate virtual servers across hosts?
Not sure the servers across hosts.
Bernie, are you still on?
Pass servers will be tied to that.
Are they referring to vMotion?
I think so. I'll read the question again. Hang on just a second. We're using Grid K1 cards in vSphere with Direct Path I/O configured. Will the vGPU deployment model allow us to live migrate virtual servers across hosts? I think my SE may have dropped, so I'm going to table that question. I know who asked it, so I will get back to that specific customer for now.
Okay.
Unless somebody else has any comments about that.
Yeah, the only comment I can make, it sounds like they want to do a live migration to a vMotion, which once again, vMotion is not supported on vGPUs, so it would not be able to do that. The other part of it is talking about is today they are running VDGA, which is direct access mode, so it's a one-to-one GPU model support, and they can move to vGPU, but it wouldn't be a live migration. Let's see what Bernie says.
Okay. Yeah, and I believe Bernie has had to drop, so we'll make sure we get that question answered.
Steve, I have a question just came in.
Thank you.
Are any of the schools doing DR to their VDI deployment?
This is James at FAU. We do not worry about DR for VDI because it wouldn't be considered mission critical. So if we were offline for a little while, we've just made the assumption that we wouldn't need that extra hardware somewhere else for right now.
For here at OU, we're kind of looking at Horizon 6, especially with the fact that we can kind of do cross vMotions across different vCenters. So, I mean, for us, it wouldn't be so much for, keeping the labs up. We kind of have a live DR site just so that we know everything's up and operational, but it's meaning so that if we need to stand up a pool for a high-level assets or administrators so that they need to communicate or some way they can compute. It's kind of meant as a last, kind of a way for either our administrators we connect if anything should happen to our administrative building. So we kind of have one in the works, nothing implemented yet, but we are looking for other use cases that we can actually, have a kind of, I guess, a co-op, a continuum of operations for like type of disasters.
Okay. Well, we're running a bit long, so that was the last question. Hang on just a second. There's another question just came in. It says, we will have 2 servers running in tandem. We expect to have around 100 users on the VDI system. So both servers hopefully will be able to handle around 100 users.
No.
I think.
Okay, Steve, I'm back. I don't know what happened.
All right.
I got dropped.
That's quite all right. Let me read this. We have one last question in the window. And it says, we will have 2 servers running in tandem. We expect to have around 100 users on the VDI system. So both servers hopefully will be able to handle around 100 users. I think that's a question anyway.
Yeah, it's the same. Brent has a previous question asking how does NVIDIA deal with the regular, knowledge worker users who do not need graphics. Maybe if I may, ODU and FAU folks, maybe see how you guys deal with that and have a better direct experience.
I'll go first. This is ODU. Brian, well, one of the things we do for our users that don't have we have a computer that's designated without the NVIDIA card. You know, I guess when we're running shared graphics, so if nobody's utilizing it, if you have, like, let's say our lab user, one's using AutoCAD and the other one is just using Word, you know, those cards, there's no impact. But if you know that you're having, let's say, administrative users, then I'd say, you know, design your system around what your use case is. If you have 100 users, you know, you want to plan for, you know, what happens if a host goes down. Will your other server be able to handle all 200 users if there's 100 on each? Those are the considerations you want to look at, and that's why I say, that's why I stress where having VCOPs some way, or some, you know, or SolarWinds, some way to monitor your environment will allow you to kind of see where your headroom is and what you can do with your environment.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Again, we're running a bit long. That was the last question in the window. I want to thank again Puran Rambarose with FAU and James Mauser with FAU, as well as Warren Marcelino with Old Dominion, and Ismet Nisikalachi with NVIDIA, and Bernie Watson, our SE here at VMware, for attending today. I will follow up this session. It is being recorded with an email with a link to that recording and a link to all of the information that NVIDIA presented today. If you have any questions, you can forward those to me in email. You can also reach out to your VMware and NVIDIA reps as necessary. Again, thank you to everyone, and that ends our session today.
Thank you.
Thank you.